That's my vision for America. Education, energy, innovation, infrastructure, and a tax code focused on American job creation and balanced deficit reduction.
President Obama in what the White House called a major speech today on his plan for the economy in a second term. Let's bring in our panel. David Drucker of Roll Call, Juan Williams with the Hill newspaper, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. So for those who doubted that the president has a vision for the next 4 years, you just heard it. Let me make sure I got it. Education, energy, innovation, infrastructure, and balanced deficit reduction. Charles, are you sold?
Oh, absolutely. I'm in the market 100%. Look, this isn't a vision. This is a rehash. There's absolutely nothing new here. And look, his own staff admitted that days ago, saying this is a way to frame the debate again. Well, to frame a debate means there's nothing in the frame. That the picture is empty. It's the same one he's been saying. It's small ball, and the reason is the big answers that he thought he had in 2009, he has tried. Gigantic stimulus. He thought there would be something with health care, which would somehow reduce expenditures and thus help us on debt and deficit. Of course, his health care monstrosity is going to increase spending by $1.76 trillion. So the big answers, the vision answers, are the ones he had in 2009. They have produced an economy that grows at under 2%, which cannot sustain even the current horrible unemployment rate. It has to rise at 2%. And so he's down to repeating education, energy, innovation. Anybody who believes that that is either going to work or is a vision, I think is hopelessly oversold on this.
You know, Juan, you can argue whether or not the Obama policies are the right policies or not, but did you hear anything in that speech that was new or different, or was his basic message for the next 4 years more of the same?
No, I think he has a vision here, and I think the vision, he said it very clearly. He said the one thing that he and Mitt Romney agree on is that this election's about the economy, and that he has a quite a distinct vision from Mitt Romney. So when it comes to investing, for example, in infrastructure, we know, going back to the arguments of last week, that Mitt Romney does not believe that this country needs more teachers, firemen, policemen, etc. Barack Obama does. And today he was saying very clearly that when it comes to investing in the middle class in terms of that education, training, etc., he believes that's the path forward, and then said, and I thought he really put it to Mitt Romney in this sense, so where exactly is the payment for all these tax cuts for the corporations, for individuals, that is in your vision for how America can move forward economically? You know, Mitt Romney has not laid out where those cuts would be made in terms of spending and who would have to suffer the consequence. And I think that's the hook in what President Obama had to say today is these cuts would impact the middle class, and I think that's what's new here. He is now making an income inequality argument as an appeal to voters.
David.
The president's in a tough spot because the economy isn't doing well, and unlike 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, people are going to think that it's his fault, and he does have a record. So he's trying to balance, in a sense, saying that he's made things better while acknowledging that things aren't good enough. And I think today the message of it's not my fault and it could have been worse, which is something he says quite a bit, didn't cut it, and over time, unless Romney were to really tank, won't cut it. I think what he needs to do is try and focus more on debt and deficit and a little bit less on the government spending, because I think where Americans are right now is very worried about debt and deficit. But it struck me listening to this speech, I mean, clearly it was intended to reframe the issue and to allow him to go on the offensive. You noticed how much he mentioned Mr. Romney, Governor Romney. Clearly this was meant for that. But I think the president is also making an appeal to his base. And right now this is all about pumping up Democratic votes everywhere he can, because this is not a message that is going to sell in the middle.
You know, it struck me listening to the president today. For part of his speech, it went on for 54 minutes, which I must say I couldn't stick around for, that the president is making the same argument against Romney policies that he made against Republicans in general in the 2010 midterm. Then he said that they drove us into the ditch, and now they want the keys to the car back, and they shouldn't get them because they don't know how to drive. Of course, the midterm election, as the president famously said, ended up with a shellacking for Democrats. Why should the result, if it's the same argument, be any different this time?
Well, if I were his advisor, that's what I would say. I mean, there's no way that you can repeat the argument. His argument today is the same Keynesian argument. We got to do another stimulus. He won't use the word because it's toxic after the failure of the first. But he believes it, a Keynesian expansion of tax and spend, more government, more hiring, and somehow that's going to cure economic ills. You can argue that hiring a teacher is a good idea, but to make an argument that hiring a teacher today is going to change the rate of growth of our economy, which is now 1.7%, which will not yield any jobs and will actually shrink the private sector, is simply an argument that you can't make. And he refuses to seize the big things, the ones that people like William Galston, who was an advisor to the Clinton administration, liberals have advised him, seize tax reform, seize entitlement reform, but he won't because he wants to attack the Republicans on the Ryan ideas, and thus he has no option of doing something large that would be credible.
Meanwhile, Mitt Romney made a pre-buttal speech in Cincinnati, also in Ohio, today, just minutes before the president spoke, and here's some of what he had to say.
He's been president for 3.5 years, and talk is cheap. Action speaks very loud. And if you want to see the results of his economic policies, look around Ohio, look around the country, and you'll see that a lot of people are hurting. A lot of people have had some real tough times.
Juan, is that enough, or does Romney have to offer more of an affirmative agenda of his own?
I don't think there's any question, and when I talk to the Romney people, they know that he needs an agenda of his own. He has to have some ideas. Today, it comes across as rather vacuous. I mean, what he's basically saying is, hey, let's look at President Obama's record. The economy is recovering, but not recovering at a pace that is satisfactory to most people in this country. That's why they put out the ad today about the private sector is doing fine, to mock Obama. And I think it effectively does that. But does the challenger have an idea that can say to the American people, here's how I think the American people will get back to work? He talks today about more drilling, more oil exploration, XL pipeline in specific, you know, so you get 6,000 jobs for 2 years. That's not going to turn the economy around. He says we're going to have more tax cuts. That invites derision because people say, well, wait a second, wasn't that the same policy that we had under the Bush years that led us into this situation? So he's going to have to come up with better ideas, and right now that's the hope. Because you know what? If you just look at Obama, there's a problem in terms of people, as David was saying, well, gee, we think we should be doing better.
How did the cut in taxes lead to the collapse of Lehman Brothers? Show me the connection. It's a complete non sequitur.
The carbon taxes.
No, the cut in taxes.
Oh, the cut in taxes.
The Bush tax cuts, how did they give us Lehman Brothers?
No, but they gave you a huge deficit, Charles. It gives you a huge deficit.
Look, if
everybody says it's a deficit issue. It's not. If it's a deficit
because
issue.
We're running out of time in this segment.
If the argument is about what happened under the last administration, right, the president probably loses. The argument for the president needs to be about the next 4 years, and he needs to win the argument. The challenge for Romney is going to come in the fall, when he really has to talk about entitlement reform and tax reform, where he's on the record proposing things that could be tricky for a lot of voters to accept. Can he make the sale?
All right. We're going to leave it there. Next up, Syria and a split inside the Obama administration over whether Russia really is sending new attack helicopters to the conflict.